Hello and welcome to today's Bitrix24 webinar, Total Telephony. Thank you for joining today. Okay, so we'll just go through some introductions first of all. So my name's Sam Connor, I'm Sales Manager here at Intreface, and we're Bitrix24 Gold Partners. We're based in the UK, the US and Hong Kong, and we offer a full range of services to assist you with Bitrix24. So starting off with pre-sale support, so we can really understand your requirements in detail, see if Bitrix24 could be a good fit for what you're trying to achieve. And if it is, we can then set up the Bitrix24 system for you. So we can really make sure the system works exactly how the business needs it to. So you can start to get value for money out of the system as quickly as possible. If you're looking at the self-hosted edition of Bitrix24, then we have our own hosting services available for you. And if you then, once the system's set up, we can then provide training and ongoing dedicated support to really make sure you get the most possible value out of the Bitrix24 system. And we also provide proactive advice, so we can really make sure the system isn't just working for you, but we can show you other features within your Bitrix24 platform that we think you could gain value from using moving forward. Okay, so if you have maybe come to today's webinar to actually understand Bitrix24 in more detail overall, then just to give you a bit of a flavor about Bitrix24, it is essentially a collaboration suite of well in excess now of 40 different modules that you can use to help you to manage your business. Now, today specifically, we'll be focusing on the telephony module. So we'll see how we can integrate phone lines into Bitrix so we can answer calls, make calls, have those calls recorded directly inside Bitrix24. But just to explain a bit more about Bitrix24, there are over 12 million organizations now that use the Bitrix24 system to help them to manage their business. And the system, it's available in two different editions. So we have the Bitrix24 Cloud, and then we have the Bitrix24 self-hosted solution. So we'll be covering functionality across both systems today. Now, if there is anything where you have to be on a certain tier of package, we'll make sure we explain that to you. Okay, and in terms of pricing, so prices start from $49 per month for a cloud-based edition. And if you're looking at the self-hosted edition, that starts at the business 50 package. So that's $2,990. It's just increased now by up to $3,590. And that is for year one. And then in year two and ongoing annually, you'll pay approximately 25% as a renewal fee. Okay, so today's webinar is Total Telephony. So we want to understand, first of all, why you should use Bitrix24 for your telephony requirements. So first of all, Bitrix has a built-in phone system. So actually, to start receiving calls in Bitrix and making calls, there isn't too much setup required if you rent a number through Bitrix24. So it's really simple to start setting up. Then we can integrate also with an existing PBX if you want to keep your existing numbers. So it's actually possible to feed your phone numbers into Bitrix24 and receive calls and record those calls in the CRM, as it mentions there, CRM integration. So that's really powerful because we can then record calls against each customer's record. And when a call comes into the system, we can pull up that customer's details. So we're able to see who is calling in before we even answer that phone call. So you can prepare for the call. We also have reporting functionality, so we can build reports to analyze the information on our phone calls. And if you're going to start off with renting a number in Bitrix, it is fairly cheap. So it's low cost to set up inside our system. Okay, so let's now take a look at the different options. So essentially what we're going to be looking at in today's webinar are two options for integration. So first of all, we have the out-of-the-box Bitrix24 telephony option. So essentially this option here is where we rent a Bitrix24 number. Okay, so we'll go through that process first of all. Then the second option is integrating your existing phone system into Bitrix. So those are the two options that we have. So what we will do first of all is let's take a look at the Bitrix telephony feature. So let's go into our system and then let's see how we can rent a Bitrix24 number. Okay, so we're inside our Bitrix system. So you want to go to the telephony module on the menu or at the top here in the search. You can also search and you'll find the item there for telephony. Okay, so the first option here is to rent a number. So what we can do is go over to the rent a number feature. And if we click on there, this will open up the rent a number page. And what we want to do in here is select the country that we want to rent a number for. So there's a large number of countries here that you can select from. So let's say if I want to select the UK, and then I want to select the type of number. So if it's a local number, I could then select the region that I want to use for that particular number. So it's very customizable in terms of the locality that you can select. And then if I went to rent that number, that is going to cost me approximately $6 to rent that Bitrix24 number per month. Okay, so that includes all inbound calls. So that is included. So it's, as we mentioned, in terms of setup, it's fairly cheap. So you're paying $6 a month there to rent a number, and all inbound calls are included. And then outbound calls are charged per minute based on where you are calling to. Okay, so here is the call rates, depending on what country you're calling to. These are the rates that you're going to be charged per minute for calling out to that country. So what we will do is we can add our information. I'll just add this into the Zoom window and on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions about those call rates, please do ask. So that's what you would pay per minute to call out. So essentially, I could rent this number now, and that number is going to be integrated into my Bitrix24 system. So that is essentially, that is the setup work done right there for our telephony integration. So that's why one of the key benefits of renting a number through Bitrix is how simple it is to then start using that functionality in the system. So once we've set up the number, you'll then need to top up your balance. So you'll need to add some credit to your account so you can then start making calls. And you'll see the numbers that you've rented in the My Numbers section here. So we can see here we're renting 2 numbers. And what we can then do with each of those numbers is we can set up our virtual phone system. So let's go into a number and see the different options that we have to set up the number. Okay, so we've just gone into the number here that we're renting. So you can customize the phone system for each individual number. So on this number here, for example, first of all, for inbound call routing, I could play some welcome music, or I could set up a voice menu. So this is a really powerful feature that you have within that $6 per month. So I can go into my menu here, and what I can do is I can set up a voice menu. So let's say, for example, in here, I say, let's select 1 to go to a specific queue group. So you can set up queue groups, which is a group of people where the call can go to. So very commonly, our customers will set up queue groups for the different departments. So let's say press 1 for sales, and then let's press 2 for support. So we're choosing our options there. The customer can go through those options, select the most appropriate. And then up here, we can choose and add the message that gets spoken to the customer to explain the options that they have. So let's then put into here, press 1 for sales, press 2 for support. Okay. So we can then add that message into there, and we can then choose the language. So if you're in different countries here, you could select the different language here for how that message gets relayed to the customer. You can choose the speed and the volume. Or the other option, if you didn't want to do that, is you could also upload an audio file. So if you want to actually speak out that message yourself, you could then upload that message into the system. Okay, so one thing just to mention here on the IVR options. So this is where the cloud licenses there are different options depending on the package that you have. So if you want to have unlimited voice menu here, so where we could go, say, option 3, option 4, option 5, you could have an infinite number of options on your voice menu. You would need to have at least the professional cloud license. If you're on the basic or standard edition, you can only have up to 2 levels. So like we've got here, the 2 levels, that's as far as you could go. If you wanted to then add a third into here, you would need to have at least the professional cloud license. So that's something to bear in mind. If you've got many departments and you're going to have lots of call routings, it's something to think about. You're going to need at least the professional cloud edition. Okay, so we can set up our voice menu there. And as we can see here, we can set up our queue group. So for the different groups, so here's our support group. I can add the relevant support members to that particular group. So that's when, if someone selected option 2 on the voice menu, it's going to go to that specific group of people. And we can then take it to a next level. So inside here, we can then distribute those calls. So are we saying those calls go evenly across all those members, or do we go exactly as required in that group? So we could go across each person, ring for a certain number of rings, and then move on to the next person. So we might say, for example, ring each person. So John first for 6 rings. If John doesn't pick up, it then goes to Mark, and etc. Or we could just go to everybody in the group. Okay, and then you can select the different groups or add your own groups, and then I can see the sales team there. So you can customize the settings for each queue group. Okay, so that's setting up the structure for inbound calls. We then have CRM integration. So a really nice feature here is the ability to create a new lead. So if somebody calls into our number, but that number is not registered in the CRM system, we could create a brand new lead inside the lead database. So that's a really nice feature we can enable. And then for the options here for creating lead, you might want to do this if you're making an outbound call to a number as well. So you can configure the CRM integration settings here. And a really important feature alongside the CRM integration is the recording of calls. So inside here, you can turn on or turn off. You may not want to record calls in the system, but a lot of clients we work with for their specific industries, for auditing purposes, they have to have their calls recorded. So a lot of financial businesses, they need to have, or accountants, they need to have their calls recorded. So we can save those calls in the system, and we can play a warning message that the call will be recorded for inbound calls. So it's as simple as that to turn on call recording. Then we could choose our working hours. So you might have specific hours when calls can be answered. So you can turn on your working hours. And then you could have an out of hours recorded message, or you might forward that call to a specific number. Okay, so if it's out of hours, you may have a specific person who actually responds to those calls. So you're able to set up that call forwarding inside the system. Okay. Then we have some additional options here. So you might want to set the prefix number for outbound calls. And what we can then also do is set up the hold music. So if a customer's on hold, you then might want to set up specific hold music as well. So for every number you're renting, you can see how completely customizable that virtual phone system is. So you can really make that completely bespoke for how you want to work. Now, obviously, setting up those settings, it's very important that is set up correctly. So if I just go back into the telephony module here, you can see this box here called access permissions. It's important we get that set up. So for each role inside the system, what we can do is we can set up user roles. Okay, so like here we have administrator, and we might set up another role, which is, let's say, a standard user. And then based on that role, we can then choose with each setting in the telephony module what that access right is going to be. So let's say for telephony settings, we're going to deny all access, because standard users, they don't need to be accessing that area to set up the system. But let's say we can set it up so for outbound calls, they can call their CRM clients inside the system. So I can save that user role, inside the system, and then we can apply that user role for specific people. So inside here we can see Max Smith is an administrator, but I might change their role to another role in the system. So you can set very granular permissions inside the CRM. Okay, so that's setting up our access permissions. So we've set up our virtual phone system, we've set permissions for who's able to configure that moving forward. And then we can start now to look at the functionality now inside the CRM. Now we have set up the CRM integration. So what we're going to do here is let's see what it looks like when a client calls in to one of our rented numbers and their information is already stored inside the Bitrix24 CRM. It's going to pop up with their details so we can see that record before we answer the call. Okay, so you can see Sam Moon is calling in, so he's head of purchasing at Techco. So I can now answer that call, I could transfer that call, etc., through the system. So you have that complete integration with your Bitrix system, so those calls will feed into the system. And let's go into the CRM and go into our customer database. So this is where we store a record of all of our customers. And if we go into the client's record, you can then see if we have the recording setting turned on, you'll then be able to see all of those recordings inside the system. So I can play those calls back. I can see the notes. I can see all the history about those calls. I can click and call directly through the system. So you can click and call directly on the client's page. So you can see now with that CRM integration, you've got a huge amount of power. You've got all of that communication dialogue synced with that customer's record. So when you're maybe having future conversations with that client, you can come back into here and quickly play those calls back. Remember what those latest conversations were, so you can then make sure your next conversation is very focused on what the flow of the communication dialogue has been with the customer. So that is incredibly valuable to gain insights into your customer's record. But it's not just individual phone records there. So we've just seen an individual phone user, so we can see that the customer's record inside the system. We have also call centers that use Bitrix24. So what you could also do is set up call lists for your sales team to be able to go through and make their calls. So for example, here, let's have a look at some of our leads. So what we may say, for example, is we could drill down into specific leads inside the system here. So it could be based on stages, for example, so we can drill down to that specific lead database. And let's say, for example, out of this group of leads, so I know I spoke with Lindsay yesterday, so I'm going to take her out of this list. So you can choose specific groups of records inside your CRM system. And then what I can do is I could create a call list. So I can then create that list. So it's that specific group of leads that we have selected. I can then create a call list. So I can then call those leads inside my Bitrix system. So I can set up that call list. I can choose a date when that call list needs to be actioned. So I'm going to give this half an hour for the time frame for when this needs to be completed. I'm going to assign it to one of our sales reps, so I can see that Joanne's availability, so that's fine. So I'm booking that in for 9 a.m. on Thursday morning, and when we can then add a subject. Okay, so then I could also add some more details. Okay, so we can then attach that, and that's now going to be saved into Joanne's activity list. So now she can see that call list and then make those calls directly through the system. Or what you could also do is just start dialing straight through the system here. So you have a semi-automated dialer system. So I could start calling that group of leads and call them through the system. So then we can go on to the next call, and we can then mark that call. So that was successful. I can then move on to my next call. So you can also go through an almost automated cycle to call through your database inside Bitrix24. So let's look at some of the powerful CRM integrations. Now, you can also use the mobile application as well. So you could answer calls and make calls using the Bitrix24 mobile app. So you don't have to be on the browser here. So I'm on the browser edition of Bitrix, and there's also a desktop application, but you could use the mobile app as well to make and answer calls through the system. Okay, so that is a look there at our ability to create call lists. But then we could take that to a next level. Rather than having to manually assign call lists and make those calls, we could use automations in Bitrix to let Bitrix do that work for you. Okay, so let's go into our automation. So we won't go into too much detail around the CRM today, because we do have a full webinar where we focus on the CRM system. But just to explain, so inside our lead database here, so we create stages that we progress a lead through. So that's completely customizable to your sales process to qualify the lead. What we can do using automations then is we could set up a robocall. Okay, so what we can do inside here is we could set up a call to go to the customer. So inside here, we can add that call. And let's choose again, you could set up an audio message, or you could add a text that gets relayed to the customer. So very similar to when we set up the IVR structure earlier on. So let's say I want to add that as text. So I can add my message. And what's really powerful here is we can pull in the data from the CRM system. So I'm going to say hi, and it's going to pull in dynamically the lead's name when that gets spoken to. Okay, so we can add that message, then choose the language, so the tonality. So I can choose the language, again, the speed and volume for that message. So let's now save that inside here. I'm going to move that to when it's looking good. And let's call this offer call. So what will happen here is now, as soon as the lead is moved to the looking good stage, we're running this immediately, but you might want to configure this so it runs, let's say 2 days time, for example, just to show you how you can change the time parameters. So what we're saying here now is in 2 days time, if the lead is still at this looking good stage, we're going to automate a phone call to that lead. So when they answer, it's then going to relay that message to the customer over voice as a robocall, and it's dynamically populated with the information from that lead. So you can start to see how the telephony integration, and combining this with the power of automations in the CRM, can start to streamline the whole sales process. So you don't need to have even the sales reps making these calls. The Bitrix system can manage the whole process for you inside the system. Okay, so that is a look at the Bitrix24 telephony integration. So that's option one. Okay, so that is the renting of a Bitrix24 number. Let's just see if we have any questions. So okay, I can see a few questions here off LinkedIn. Is there a limit to the number of telephone numbers that you can rent? So assuming there, if you're referring to the Bitrix24 rented numbers, so there's no limit, no. So you could rent as many numbers as you like, really. Though I would say, because we can really configure the virtual phone system here, so we've seen how we can set up call groups. So you can set up the different departments and have calls routed to the relevant group or to the relevant responsible person. Unless you've got a very specific business case, I don't really see a reason why you would need to rent multiple phone numbers. You could just have that one number, and then the calls can be routed to the relevant area of the business using the advanced telephony setup for your virtual phone system. But yeah, there is no limit to the number of numbers you could rent. One thing to point out, if we go back into here, obviously we looked earlier on at the United Kingdom. Okay, so we looked at the UK, where we were renting a number. With some jurisdictions, let's say if we go to look at renting a number in Germany, you do need to provide documentation. Okay, so as you can see here, please note that a valid postal address is required for the location you are about to rent a phone number for. Failing to provide a valid address may potentially result in the phone number being disconnected, but you will still be charged for that connection cost and for that first month. So it's important to look at that. With certain countries, you will need to provide evidence and analysis that you have a location in that jurisdiction. because that's something to just think about, okay, when you're choosing to rent your numbers, especially if you're going to rent a lot of numbers, you need to keep that in mind. Okay, so now let's take a look at our second option, which is integrations. Okay, so we've seen how we can rent a Bitrix24 number. That isn't going to be suitable for some businesses. Okay, so let's just discuss first of all why you may want to integrate an existing phone system into Bitrix. So, for example, you may have a small team using the CRM. It may make sense then that continue to use their existing phone system. If they've already got their existing phone numbers that their clients call day by day, you don't really want to then change your phone number because you may then lose some custom. So that's one reason to keep your phone system, to keep those existing numbers and feed them into Bitrix. You may have a phone provider where you've got very specific functionality with that provider. So you may then want to connect that in, continue with that functionality, but then have it integrate with the CRM so you can gain the benefits of using the CRM integration with Bitrix. Or quite a few businesses as well, they have negotiated really good call packages with their phone network. So actually, rather than then moving to the Bitrix rented number, actually it may be more commercially viable for them to continue working on the contract that they have in their existing billing arrangement. So there's quite a few reasons for some businesses why continuing with their phone system is a critical requirement. So we can then look to integrate. Okay, so let's now go through the options for integration. So first of all, the key question to ask first of all is if you have an Office or a cloud PBX. So a PBX is a private branch exchange. If you do, the first option we should look at is using either, depending if you've got the Office or the cloud PBX, is those two options here. So let's say if you have the cloud PBX, you can open up the cloud PBX slide form here. So what we can do with this is we can click on the Connect Cloud PBX button here, and it will open up a form where we need to add the details from your cloud PBX onto this form to then sync that information. And then once we've added that information, we can then start to test out the SIP connector to feed in your SIP trunks into Bitrix24. Now for this, and the information is here, you have 60 minutes free to configure and test outbound calls to make sure that the connection has worked correctly. Okay, you receive inbound calls via your Bitrix SIP for free. Okay, so once you've completed that testing, once those outbound calls are working correctly, you can then purchase the SIP connector to continue using your phone lines inside Bitrix24. And the SIP connector is going to cost you $49 per month. There's no change to that. It is simply, that is the flat fee, $49 per month. And that's the same if you're using the cloud PBX or if you're going to use the Office PBX. Okay, so it's exactly the same. The only difference is the parameters. Because it's an Office PBX, there's going to be different credentials here on the form that you fill in. And again, you get 60 minutes free to test the integration. Okay, so that's the first option, and that works for a lot of companies using the SIP connector. The second option is we can then look into the App Store. Okay, so Bitrix has integrations with many different phone providers that we could look to use. So if your phone provider is actually part of the integration application network, then what we could look to do is integrate those phone apps into the system. So when you come into the App Store here, if you search telephony, here you can see all the different phone providers that Bitrix24 has integrations with. So such as Bitrix, Go to Connect, we've got Ring Central. So this is a really popular integration here. So if you say, for example, if you're with Ring Central, you could install this application and then make those calls and have it integrated with the Bitrix24 CRM. So that's, again, a really powerful way to use the Bitrix system using the already built integrations with specific phone providers. Now, again, one thing to point out with this is there are specific packages you have to have with the phone provider to use some of the subscriptions. So, for example, on the Ring Central, you need to have a premium or enterprise Ring Central plan, and you also have to have a commercial Bitrix24 license. So if you're on the free edition of Bitrix, this isn't going to work for you. You need to upgrade to a commercial package. Okay, so that's a second option, is using one of the applications here. And then the third option is, if the SIP connector is not going to work for you, and if there isn't an application in the App Store, we could look to build you a bespoke integration using the API. Okay, so if nothing else is achievable, we could look to do that, to use the Bitrix API to develop a bespoke integration with your phone system. Okay, now we've done this before, and it is a really powerful way to connect your phone system with Bitrix, though because it's a bespoke integration, you could be looking in the region of $15,000 to $20,000 to complete that type of integration. So we can talk through the options that we have with you if you're looking to integrate your phone lines into Bitrix24. Okay, so that is a look at integrations. Let's just see if we have any other questions. Okay, what if I want to port my numbers into Bitrix24? So essentially that's kind of what we have just gone through. If you're wanting to, you say port your numbers, well, you'd be porting your numbers to a specific phone provider, and then we'd have to use one of those integration methods to feed your phone provider's networks into Bitrix24. If you're going to rent a number from Bitrix, that is a brand new number. It will not be the same number as you currently have. You may be able to forward phone calls from your existing number over to your new Bitrix number, but it is a separate number. That's something just to be aware of and to point out. Okay. Okay, so now what we'll take a look at, we mentioned around costs. So first of all, renting of the Bitrix number, it's around $4 to $6 per month to rent a number. With certain countries, there will be an integration cost. So we saw with Germany, for example, that was $5. So there can be a cost as a connection as well. In terms of call rates, so we had a brief look at these already. So in terms of renting a number through Bitrix, inbound calls, they're included with the monthly call rates. And then outbound calls, you're going to be charged per minute based on the country you're calling to. So those are the call rates, and we've added them into the Zoom and LinkedIn chat window, so you can take a look at those. Okay, so that is a look at renting of a number. If you're going to do an integration, so first option is the SIP connector. So that's going to cost $49 per month to rent the SIP connector. Then all of your phone charges, that just continues with your phone provider. So that contract you have, it will just continue as it is right now. Then if we look at a bespoke integration, as I say, we can use the Bitrix API. That could cost somewhere in the region of $15,000 to $20,000 to get you that robust integration with your phone provider. Okay, so moving on to look at reporting. So within the Bitrix system, we have quite a few newish type of reports. So if we go into the call details area, first of all, this is where you can see a record of every single call that is actioned through the Bitrix system. So whether it's inbound or outbound, even if it's a robocall here, like you can see, you'll see all of that information. So inside here, you'll have that record. You can then filter through this information as well. And you can see here, so that call that we had coming in from our customer, Mark Moon, earlier on, that has been marked inside the system. And you can customize the actual data points here as well. So you might just want to show specific columns of information, and then you can export the information out into Excel. But we also have more advanced reports as well. So inside call statistics, so what we can do here is we can build our own dashboard reports looking at information from our reporting telephony module. So let's say I might just want to look at all of our data from last year, for example, for reporting purposes. You can drill down into that data and save those filters inside the system. We might want to look, actually, this is really useful, looking at call density. So actually we can see, if we just look further over, let's say if we wanted to analyze call density for last year, so we can actually make sure we're scheduling resources appropriately across the business. I can see when we're busiest, we're inbound calls, but I can then also see when we're missing calls. So I can see here Monday, 5 till 6 p.m., that's the highest area where we're missing calls. So we need to start scheduling resources at that time of day. So you can use these high-level reports to really analyze those calls. Or, for example, we might want to analyze employee involvement as well. So let's say, again, if we wanted to look at last year's employee involvement, we can then analyze the call reports across the organization. So I can see who's taking the inbound and outbound calls across the teams. I might want to look at who's actually on the phone the longest in terms of call durations. So you can build high-level dashboard reports based on the data from your telephony module. Okay, so that is the end of today's Total Telephony webinar. Thank you very much for joining today. So we've seen how we can set up a virtual phone system. It is very configurable to route calls, to record calls, to have calls forwarded out of hours. So you can really set up a robust virtual phone system. We've seen how we can integrate that with the CRM system. So all of that communication log is synced into the CRM. And then we've seen the advanced reports we can build based on the data from the telephony module. And hopefully you've seen today actually how low cost it can be. If you're renting a Bitrix number, it's really setting up that number and then you're ready to go. So it's low cost and low setup through renting a Bitrix24 number. Okay, so here are a selection of our up and coming webinars. You can register for those at Intreface.com/webinars. If you have any questions in the meantime, you can contact us, sales@Intreface.com, and one of our team will be happy to assist you with your inquiry. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today on the Total Telephony webinar. I look forward to seeing you on our future webinars as well. Bye for now.